everybody. Welcome back to an episode of the Get Wealth Podcast. Special guest here, Brandon Arter. Glad you're able to find time to get on the podcast and talk about some real estate. You do a lot of deals and you're doing it at a high level. So I'm excited to pick your brain and get into it. Thanks for coming on the show, man.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me on, dude. Appreciate it.
So let's kind of just start off with your background and how you got into real estate. Where did that all begin?
Oh man, that's a long story. So I'm in Arizona, like I'm East Valley, like born and raised over here. I grew up like Tempe, Chandler, lived in Tucson for a little bit. We won't talk about that very much. And then after high school, I had a few kind of different jobs. I actually got hired right down the street from me right now is a place called the Radford School. It's a race car driving school, and back then it was known as the Bondurant School. So like directly out of high school, I got hired doing that. I thought this might be what I do forever, right? It was 18-year-old kid driving race cars. That's pretty hard to beat. But then I kind of quickly found out there wasn't a lot of money in the side I was on. You know, there is money to be in the racing industry, but if you actually want to be the one driving the car, they say if you want to make $1 million driving race cars, they say start with 2. So it's pretty much a losing endeavor on most parts. In fact, I still got buddies that do drive professionally, and it's taken them a long time to get to a point where it's pretty even keel for them. So,
wow.
Found out, kind of wasn't the route I wanted to go down. I knew I wanted to make money. I just didn't know how I was going to do it. So I left and I started. I actually left there. So get this, I leave race car driving school where I'm like, dude, I've got pretty much show up when I want, leave when I want. I had worked there for like 6 or 7 years at that point. So I had a pretty good rapport with everybody. And I was like, I want to go make more money. I had a buddy that was working construction, and he was like, hey man, you can have basically unlimited hours. I'm like, oh, unlimited hours equals unlimited overtime. So I actually left that job and I went and worked for an underground construction company. I was digging holes with a shovel, like 14 to 15 hours a day. I mean, that's how much I wanted to chase the money. There was some like internal political bullshit at the old job, but I wanted to get out of, but I wanted to make money.
Yeah.
And I was at that time, I was 24 at that time. So I didn't really have a good understanding of like leveraging my time, right? I just knew I wanted to go make more money. And I think I started like $16 an hour, but I could get overtime, double overtime, which I think the first week I worked for those guys, I worked like 100 hours. Like, it was like insane. So I hit overtime by like Wednesday and then like double. So I was making a lot of money, at least for me at that time. I was making sometimes $1,500 to $2,000 a week. So a lot of cash. But you start to realize, I did it for about 6 months. I started realizing, I can't do this forever. Like it's not a scalable deal. And even at, 24, 25, my body started to wear. I started to get like carpal tunnel, as I was younger. So I kind of realized like, hey, this isn't what I wanted to do either. And I actually left that job as I was getting married. I got married like right as I turned 26. And I was like, yeah, it's probably a good time to leave. We stacked up a bunch of cash, and I was like, I'll just get married and kind of figure it out after that. After I got married, I had a buddy whose dad ran a general contracting company, and they remodeled a bunch of like retail stores. Like Swarovski Crystal was one of them. One of the biggest ones they did, one of the biggest accounts they had was Foot Locker. So we would travel around to Foot Lockers. I didn't know anything about anything. I just wanted to work. And we traveled around to Foot Lockers and do the remodeling. So I would do like the basic, like take out the garbage. Like I was not a high level guy. And, did that for a while. I did that for probably about 8 months, traveled around the country. It was in Vegas, ended up in like St. Thomas for like a month and a half. That was pretty cool as a younger guy. Problem was I wasn't with my brand new wife. Right. So like, again, I kind of had to go out and experience it and realize like, oh, that wasn't for me either. Came back to the Valley, didn't really have a job for a while. I was like, I got to just take what I can get at this point, and actually got hired at an apartment complex as a maintenance guy. And I don't know if you guys have ever lived in an apartment complex, but the guy that like, your garbage disposal takes a shit, or, toilet's clogged, or, they walk around in the morning. I used to pick up dog poop every single morning and like rake sand and like pick up garbage. So I did that for a couple of years, man. And I was like, I knew I didn't like it. In fact, I used to get like real bad anxiety. Like when I was working, I could never figure out what it was. I could never figure out like why I would get this anxiety during the day. I was working, I was doing what I was supposed to be doing, but it just never felt right. I was like, God, this sucks. And I couldn't figure it out until I kind of figured out like, oh, this isn't what I want to do. So eventually found my way into network marketing. That didn't pan out well for me at all. I'm very much a people pleaser, and if you're going to be good at network marketing, you kind of have to have this like don't give a fuck attitude about what people think about you. And I didn't have that. I didn't do very well at all. And about 6 to 8 months in, my friends stopped answering my phone calls because I was trying to get them in this pyramid scheme or whatever you want to call it. But I had buddies that made money, so I was like, man, the proof's there. I couldn't figure it out. So eventually I was like, all right, I gotta figure something out. And I had a buddy that I had met when I was at was now the Radford School, then the Bondurant School. And I always knew he made money, but I didn't really know what he did. So I reached out and I'm like, hey man, like I wanted to get into something new. I want to make some money. I'm willing to do whatever it takes, and kind of told him the story of like, hey man, here's all the shit I've done. Like I'll do anything. I don't care. And he was actually, he was a real estate investor. He didn't really have a lot of room for me at the time, and like didn't have a place to put me. So he actually referred me over to my old boss, Chad Moline, who was over at Academy Mortgage. So he referred me to this guy. He's like, hey, he's like, put a suit on, show up at this address at 4:00. And he's like, just, show up and, just be ready to talk. I'm like, all right, I can do that. So I show up in this guy's office. He's like, all right, here's what's going to happen. And I had no idea what the job was. He goes, here's what's going to happen. He goes, you're going to come work for me this year. You're going to finish out the year. You're going to make a little bit of money. He goes, next year, you're going to make $60,000. The year after that, you're going to make $100,000. And as long as you work for me, you'll never make less than 100 grand ever again. And I was like, works for me. Like, what's the job? Right. He's like, we're going to do loans. He's like, I'm going to teach you how to write loans. And at that point, I had never had a mortgage. I didn't know what writing a loan even meant. Couldn't even conceptualize, like, how does this happen? Right. Yeah. But he's like, first, he's like, go sit over in that office and we'll make sure you're not a douchebag before we hire you. So like literally he said that to me. I'm like, okay, this is going to be interesting. So I jumped right on board, man. I couldn't get enough of the mortgage world at that time. I just had so much to learn. It was so high paced. Like there was a really good pace for me, and it's unlimited potential, right? Like however many mortgages you can write is however much commission you can make, and like you could build out a team and they could do stuff for you. So it was very scalable. What I found over time was the same thing that had happened to me in that MLM world, and this actually kind of has like a through path through my careers. The same thing that had hindered me in that spot had hindered me in the loan world. I actually got really good at what I was doing. I joined a team. The team was doing really, really well. I actually kind of like started to bring on my own business. I did like the whole like top producer, bullshit, went on these trips, was making a good amount of money. I think at this time I was like 27, 28. I was making 120 to 150 grand a year. Mm-hmm. So for my age, I was doing it a little bit, right? Yeah. And then what had started to happen was kind of a little bit of that, when I need to go out and build these relationships with real estate agents or title companies or whoever to refer me these people to do these new mortgages. I found myself, sorry, 1 second, I'll send that to voicemail. All right, we still good? Yep. I found myself like I'm a people pleaser, so I wouldn't have enough of like a kind of a kill mentality I really needed to be able to say like, hey, I'm not just here to be friends with you. Like I'm here to do business. Right. Which I've learned over time, but it wasn't a natural transition for me. So fast forward, I started there in 2014, fast forward to about 2019. I really knew, I kind of started to feel that like inner angst that I had when I was working for the apartment complex of like, it's not lining up with what my goals or dreams are. Right. It just like, I go back to when I was at the apartment complex, I couldn't piece that together and what it was, but now kind of going back through it again, I'm starting to recognize this feeling like, I think that my actions aren't aligning with what my goals are, right? I don't think this is meant for me. It's kind of what a feeling I had. And I was guessing at that point, but now I know it to be fact because hindsight 2020, right? Yeah. So 2019, I told my boss, I go, hey man, I'm transitioning out. I go, I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but I'm going to transition out of this. I'm going to go figure it out. The good part about the mortgage industry is like, you still have referrals and stuff that call you. So I was able to keep my license active and just kind of do some deals here or there. At this point, I'd already had my first kid, actually my second kid. I had 2 kids by this point. I had my 2-year-old daughter and a newborn. So, pressure was on to go figure it out. And that's how much, how against the grain it was for me. I left a career where I was making decent money, really decent money, right. To go off into the unknown, to essentially $0 with a wife and 2 kids at home. So I leave there, and I actually had reached out to an old buddy that I knew during the network marketing days. So it's funny how it all strings together. His name's Cody Barton. So if you guys know Cody, he's partners with Pace Morby, the Sub 2 King. Those guys actually started me out in their office, and I was just like, hey man, just let me have a spot and I'll do my own thing. And if you can just help me with like questions I have, I go, when I get a deal, we'll just split it 50-50. So I started out JVing with those guys, like on my own. I didn't do very well at the wholesale game. Turns out I was my streak of niceness, my wanting to be liked, carried through to yet another career for me. So I'm like, man, I'm getting smoked here. So about the end of 2019, I'd been doing it about 90 days, and I'd probably spent maybe 15 grand. I had like hard cold callers and bought a bunch of data, and I was just burning through it, man. I was burning through cash. So I finally decided, like, all right, I got to figure like another path. I was like, I'll keep this going as automated as possible, but I think I want to flip a house. So I go to Cody and Pace and like, hey, sell me a house. They find me a good house to buy up in the like Northwest Valley. And this is January of 2020 at this point. So I'm like, yeah, pull the trigger. And then we have a 30-day escrow. That puts us to the beginning part of February. We close in February. I'm like, all right, cool, man. Like, where are the keys? Like, I want to get started. And they're like, oh, we missed a detail. We'd all missed it on the contract. There was a 30-day post-possession of the contract. So I'm like, all right, like shit, okay, I guess we got to wait. Like, so I, one hard money payment. I'm like, it won't kill me. I didn't factor it in, but it won't kill me. So, now we're beginning of March. I get the keys. The week I get the keys, the lockdown hits for the pandemic. And I'm like, oh shit. Like I'm literally thinking in my head, like I'm going broke. I just spent 15 grand on wholesaling. Like I did one deal at maybe $2,500 after splitting it. And now I got these keys to this house that I now own. I can't just dump it. Right. And we just went into a lockdown. I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen to real estate. Well, again, hindsight's 2020. Now we know, I thought the market was going to crash. Well, it turns out it did the complete opposite, right? And the market kind of took off. So I called my partner now, Lucas. I go, hey man, I'm in trouble. I need you to come help me. Lucas had a heavy construction background, like especially on the interiors of houses, like cabinets, flooring, all that sort of stuff. So I'm like, hey man, come help me. I'll split a portion of the profits with you. Just help me get out of this deal. So he was still working a W-2 job. He was in Chandler and then would drive up to the Northwest Valley almost every single day to help me flip this house. We sold it. I think that one made like 35 grand in total profit. So I gave him a portion of that, kept the rest, got my money back out of the deal. And we're kind of like, well, it wasn't as bad as we thought. Like maybe we should try that again. So we bought another house, renovated another one, ended up making like 40,000 on that. We're like, man, we think we might have something here. Right. So all while we're doing this, kind of as we are doing these flips, like, after doing your first one flip isn't really that tough to manage. In fact, if you have a decent contractor, really you shouldn't be at that flip any more than like a couple times a week. Otherwise you're kind of just standing around looking at stuff like in the way. Right. So as we're doing that, I'm like, man, I got to kind of kick this wholesale thing back up. Cause like, doing one flip at a time, like I got nothing to do, especially since there's two of us. Yeah. So we do some more wholesaling, again, just burning through cash, not really making any money, spending about $10,000 a month. And about 90 days in, I'm like, hey man, I think we got to pull the plug on this deal. And luckily we at the very end of that wholesale journey for us, at least the first part of our wholesale journey, we had contracted one house. We negotiated it down. We're like, we'll just flip this house ourselves. The numbers kind of make sense. We flipped that house and made like 60 grand. So we made all of our money back from the wholesaling venture. We pulled the plug on that, fired our VAs, stopped buying data, like canceled all the systems. And we're like, all right, we're done with that. We're just going to flip houses, which turned out to be a pretty instrumental turn for us. I didn't really know it, but at that point, wholesaling houses was really eating up a lot of my attention and a lot of my like focus of what I could be focusing on. And the second we stopped wholesaling at that point, I immediately wanted to go, well, there's not enough work here on the table. Like I want to go create more work, right? Which luckily my partner Lucas is really, really good at. So immediately we scaled to 2 flips. Like, all right, let's go do 2 at a time, right? So at that point we had like 2 flips, and now we're kind of at the end. Let's see here. We're at the end of 2020. We bought our first 2 flips, and we're like, all right, we're kind of doing it now. We got a couple at a time. Then we sell those 2 flips, and it kind of just took off from there, man. We were really good about just like staying really, really busy and hands-on, and we weren't scared to buy deals. So one of the things we found, like I talked to you about before we started, you asked me, okay, I think you're in the luxury side. So I don't see what I do as being in a luxury side. I see the luxury side of flips being like 2 million plus, right? Or like that's like, high end luxury.
Right.
For us, one of the things that always benefited us is we were never really scared to take a risk. So everybody we knew that we were doing flips, they were doing a couple at a time, and really they like to buy between like 2 and 400,000 and exit between like 4 and 6. Right. Well, everybody was in that market. Like that market was so competitive that you would find something for like 230,000, especially in 2021, early 2022. By the time you got your hands on it, man, it was probably 250. And there were guys just sucking all the margin out of these deals, and we couldn't get a good deal that would like make enough money to make us both enough profit after like let's call it a 6-month turn time, right? Because if we went and bought a $250,000 house and wanted to sell it, and let's say that deal even made us $40,000, well, you split that 2 ways. Now we're each making 20, right? And if it takes you 4 months to do it, and it's only $5,000 a month, like I was used to making way more in my loan days. So I'm like, well, we can't do this, right? So the only thing we knew to do, it's actually funny. I was referred to go over on Jerry Norton's podcast. And as we're on his podcast, he can see, I think it kind of clicked for him midway through that I really understood the numbers, right? My loan days kind of caught up with me, and like I understood the numbers and the leverage and all that sort of stuff. And Lucas had a good handle on the construction side of stuff. So he literally goes, I think you need to buy bigger deals, like in the middle of the podcast. And you can like see it click in my brain, like on camera, like, holy shit, I do need to buy a bigger deal. I'm like, he's right. So, I mean, the second we leave that thing, I'm like, we're buying bigger deals. As we started to buy these bigger deals, we started to realize we can negotiate like way more margin, because there were like nobody bidding on these houses, right? So if they're like, hey, I want 700,000, we'd be like, man, best we can do is like, 650. And then they'd be like, no. And they'd be like, okay. And then like a week later, we hear back, and you still good at 650. And we're like, holy shit. Like we just negotiated an extra $50,000 in this deal. Like that's crazy. That would have been all that we would have made on those other deals. And now we've got like probably another 100K in spread behind it. So we're like, holy shit, we're going to make 150 grand on this one deal. So it was really eye-opening for us to realize how much more spread was in these higher end deals, because frankly, people were scared to touch them. So, that worked out really, really well for us. And we started to kind of go into that motion, and even still talking with Jerry, he was like, you got to buy bigger deals. I'm like, damn, man, like this, like, it's crazy how much like you have to exercise your risk muscle is what he calls it, right? You have to like grow that risk muscle and like let it like you be more and more comfortable with more and more risk. So I get a call one day from a wholesaler. We're working on a deal. The deal doesn't pan out. And I go, do you have anything else? And he goes, yeah, well, I got a big deal. I go, well, I'm supposed to buy big deals, right? That's what Jerry told me. He goes, okay, I'm going to walk it tomorrow. I've never seen it. Come with me. So we go up to North Scottsdale, it's like Cactus and Scottsdale Road. And he has a house on an acre. It's like 4,200 square feet. The place is like wrecked. Knowing what I know now, that actually should have been probably a scrape. But then I didn't know enough. I knew just enough to be dangerous. I didn't know enough about this world. And we contract that property at like $885,000. So at that point, it had been like the biggest thing we'd ever contracted. This is probably the beginning of 2021. And we're like, all right, we're just going to do it, right? And if we have to scale down a little bit on the other side of the flips, we'll do it and move up into the bigger stuff. Well, this guy had tax liens that had piled up on the house. And if you guys were following kind of what was happening with the IRS in 2020 and 2021, that pandemic set them way back. So these tax liens couldn't get renegotiated. So that deal just sat in escrow. Like we'd go like 60 days. They'd be like, hey, we need another extension. I'm like, all right, cool, another extension. Because I knew the market was going up. I'm like, hey, I'll take extension after extension. So we do that for 3 months, 6 months, 8 months, 12 months later, that deal is finally ready to close. We finally get the payoffs from the IRS. Well, the market had gone up 30% in 12 months, right? So now I contracted a deal at 885 that was originally going to be worth like, I want to say it was going to be worth like 1.5. So we were going to make, a few $100,000, maybe $250,000. And by the time we get into this deal, now we're starting to look at comps, and comps are in like the low 2 millions. And I'm like, holy shit, we got over $1 million in spread in this deal. It was pretty crazy. But by the time we got to that year, we had scaled out our business so much. We'd gone from doing, at that point, we were doing like 2 or 3 flips at a time, to now I had like 21 active deals, 21 active construction projects that were, the majority of our constructions, like, I want to say the average is like $90,000 for our construction. So not cheap projects, like pretty deep projects. And we actually scaled out so much that I'm like, oh man, I don't think we have room for this deal. So we closed that deal. We just closed it because I knew there was a bunch of money. I was like, we'll figure it out. And as we walked through it a couple of times, we start to realize the rental budget for what we want to do is pretty massive. In fact, the final rental budget we ended up at, if we were going to keep it, was going to be $1 million. So we were going to be in at 885 plus some holding costs plus another $1 million. So like really like we were just planning on spending like $2 million on this place, but it would have been worth 4.5 by the time it's said and done. You know, we would have done that deal. I think the problem with me is I didn't trust the market even still at that point. I knew that we were making money on deals that we probably shouldn't have been making money on. The market was just going up and up and up and up. And I'm like, well, this isn't real, right? So we decided to sell that deal. I sat in escrow for 12 months. And by the time we sold it, we were able to sell it for, I want to say it was like $1.35 million. So we ended up we split a commission with Mike Scher from New Western. Shout out Mike Scher. And I think we ended up walking away with like 350 grand from that deal. So it was, the moral of that story was like, yeah, Jerry Norton was right, for sure.
Not bad.
But yeah, it was a pretty cool little experience going from, you know, not really being able to figure it out in the wholesale side of things. Like, yeah, let's just focus on this flip thing and then watch it go from 2 to 20 projects over the course of about 18 months and, you know, making probably at that point a few $1 million in the process.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the saying that's like like a 10-year overnight millionaire or whatever. You know how someone will kind of portray it happening overnight, but really you didn't see like all these different things you tried for the last however many years, and then it just kind of clicked, it sounds like.
Yeah, you know, and I honestly still don't think it has clicked. But you know, as you get farther into this business and you learn more stuff, like your expectations of what you can do, actually, they kind of grow with you, right? So it never, not that it never feels like enough, but there's always like kind of another stone left unturned of like, man, I wonder what would happen if I went and did that. So, but I do agree with you that, you know, when I left lending, there was a bit of like, oh, I feel like a failure, right? Because that was my career. I thought I was going to do that for the next 20 years and retire. And, you know, when I left, I'm like, I couldn't cut it. It was what kind of how I felt. But really what I found out was like, it just wasn't a good fit for me. And then once I went and found what was a good fit for me, it fucking took off. Right. So, you know, it's one of those deals that, yeah, I put in the work when I first started doing loans. I mean, I was working 14 hours a day. So same thing I was doing with that shovel, but I was just using this instead of these, right? Which for me happened to work out better because luckily this works a lot better than these do. So yeah, I was able to, a lot of that stuff did translate into this world. I was able to understand like, you know, margin and leverage and rates and what the rates would do to this, like on the selling side of things. So it did have a huge impact for sure. So
what happened with the wholesaling? Because it sounds like you're good at finding deals. So what was the misconnection?
It went away from a while. We just put it up on the shelf. I just was like, I don't want to touch it right now. We were so busy flipping. I mean, so once anyone gets to a point where they're running like maybe 4 or 5 projects at a time, it gets like, you're like, oh, I got a little bit going on, right? It gets pretty busy. So you do 20 at a time, and it is time consuming to say the least, right? So we actually got to the point where we actually probably had too many projects, and some of them were starting to sit a little bit longer than they should have because of how busy we were. So we parked it completely, man. I didn't touch it at all. We got to the point where we were seeing so many deals because we're such good buyers. So our motto was always like, if we commit on a deal, we're buying it. Like, I don't care, right? Like, it was just like, we do what we say we're going to do. And that over time translated to people love selling to us because as soon as we committed on a deal, they knew they were getting a paycheck, right? So we started getting so many deals sent to us that we couldn't buy them all. We learned that by having too many projects. So we started slowly like JVing deals, right? We're like, hey, well, we know it's a deal. We'll just buy it. Even if we like would wholesale it or close on it and resell it or just contract it, be like, hey, we're not going to keep this one. I'm going to resell it. That cool with you? And I'm like, yeah, it's fine. So really we kind of inadvertently learned how to wholesale by doing that JV process, by having deals just sent to us that we knew were deals. So, you know, fast forward to, let's see, we're in, 2022 now. It's the spring of 2022. I kind of had a feeling that we were going to have some changes coming down the pipe. The biggest thing for me, I knew was going to be from an affordability factor. So being that I knew what rates would do to a housing payment, like I've got a rate calculator on my phone. I would run the scenarios on the houses we were selling. And I'm like, man, if we could sell it at 5%, but what, as soon as the Fed started talking about raising rates, I'm like, what happens if this goes to 7? I'm like, look at that payment. That's like $5,000-$6,000 a month. Like no one's going to pay that, right? Like it's just not normal for any given family to go buy something like this. And we were selling houses that were only 2,000 square feet. Sometimes they were only 3.2s. So to sell that at 750 grand and have the payment be $5,000 a month, I knew it wasn't feasible for a family to go buy that house unless they had a shitload of equity or cash or whatever they were rolling in, which, in this market, most people do. So I kind of had a feeling coming down the pipe in the spring of 2022, this year, that we were going to start to see some big changes. So we actually kind of made a change in our business model. It's funny, you see a lot of stuff on like YouTube and Instagram and stuff right now. People are like, oh, the crash. Well, shit, we've been preparing for this for 4 months now. Like it wasn't anything new to us. I actually think most of those guys are wrong, but that's probably for a different time. But yeah, so we decided like if we're going to transition, we knew going back to the lower price points that if we wanted to like hedge our risk and have a little bit less risk in the market we were in, we had to leave the higher price points, go down to the lower ones. That's fine, but I knew it was going to make us less money, right? Because we had already been through that in the beginning of 2020. So I knew if we were going to make the money we wanted to make, we did have to fire up wholesaling again. So we actually 60 days ago now started wholesaling again. We went through Carlos Reyes and Sal. They actually had like basically a business in a box that we bought from those guys. It was pretty expensive, but they cover like the first 90 days of our cold callers and like our systems and all that stuff. And as we get up to speed, we kind of run the last 90 days, and then after that, we're pretty much on our own. So we fired that up a little bit ago. We're already scaling it. We've got 6 cold callers. I just hired a lead manager. We're doing pay per click now. So it's kind of doing the same thing the flip stuff did. We're just going to stick with it and let it kind of do this.
Yeah. What do you think were the differences between the system you have now compared to when you were burning through? Because like you mentioned 10 grand, you burned through that. Was there just spent wrong? What happened?
There was a couple things going on there. The biggest thing for me when I was originally trying to wholesale, I truly didn't believe, now that I'm looking back on it, I didn't believe I could buy houses at such a steep discount. I didn't see the value I was providing it when I was doing it originally. And I'm assuming a lot of new wholesalers this will probably resonate with them. I felt like I was stealing. I felt like I was going in, looking at these people and be like, I'm going to buy this house for 65 cents on the dollar, and I'm going to take that 35 cents for myself, which at that point I kind of needed to do because I was broke, right? But the more and more I got into flipping and the more and more we started JVing, the more and more I started to realize like, oh, these houses that we're buying, like a standard consumer cannot go buy this house. They won't know what to do with it, right? They won't be able to fix the problems we can fix. They can't do it at the budget I can do it. They can't do it at the scale I can do it. So I started to figure out like, oh, there is a place for this industry. It's not just, you hear a lot of bad stuff about wholesaler. You're seeing some new legislation start to come out to sort of like, kind of apply some red tape and put some regulations on this industry, but there is a place for it. So the biggest thing to me that I learned was like, I'm not taking anything. The fact that I have to buy this house for a discount, 65 cents on the dollar, 75 cents on the dollar, whatever that number might be, is typically because of the deferred maintenance, 1, or 2, the speed in which I need to buy the house and the risk that I incur when I go buy that house, right? So if we go buy a house cash, we waive the inspection, we waive the appraisal. A lot of that risk is on me as the buyer or whoever the end buyer might be, which I started to really have an understanding of. So going into it now, I have a different kind of lens that I look at wholesaling through, which is not like, hey, I'm going in there and I'm taking equity from some family that, let's be honest, probably needs it, but rather like, hey, I'm providing a service which you probably wouldn't be able to go get anywhere else. Like you can't just go sell this to a standard consumer. And that service is, I'm going to figure out the problems on this house. I'm going to solve it for an end buyer and let that new family come have a turnkey house that's now nice. We bring up the neighborhood, values go up, like all the good stuff that comes with it. So a little bit of a change in paradigm for me.
Yeah, it's almost like the change came from being the actual buyer. You think that's what happened?
Yeah, I really think that's what it is. Because I started to realize, like, even when I look at these deals, like I get deals sent to me all day, every day, right? All day, every day. And they'll be like, hey, look at this house. It's got $100,000 spread. I'm like, dude, like that thing needs $60,000 in rehab. I go, by the time I've rehabbed that thing and I've made hard money payments and closing costs and whatever else comes with it, and if I miss anything, like I'm losing money just by selling it, right? Like it's 5% selling cost plus whatever else. So I started to realize like, hey, these things have to have like some pretty big spreads in order for somebody to come in and provide that value, which needs to be provided for the community by, turning that trash to treasure, so to speak. So yes, that buyer perspective was huge for me. I needed it.
Yeah. I think it sounds like you have almost like a natural ability for a lot of the business as far as like putting all the pieces together and running the numbers. And one of the big things that stands out to me from that, like the whole entire story, is how are you funding these deals? Are you just raising private money, hard money? How do you put these deals together?
Good question. Yeah. I mean, it's a really good question, because what most people don't understand is if you're running 20 deals at even $5,000 in earnest, this wouldn't count any like closing costs or even close the deal. That's $100,000 just in earnest deposits, right? Which you're not getting back to the deal close. That's $100,000 just right there, just in earnest deposits, and we haven't changed the toilet yet. So a lot of it was raising private capital. I think what happened pretty naturally for us is I still am. I was very proud to do what we did. We were taking something that was ugly and deteriorated that people, frankly, whoever owned it before didn't give it the attention it deserved. It had lack maintenance, all that stuff. And we were taking all that and we were turning it into something beautiful, frankly, which is why a lot of our projects turned out the way they did, because we just had this sense of pride in the way it turned out. So in fact, sometimes I think we would lose money to have it like make a little bit better, which we've learned not to do so much in the past or more recently. But with that and showing that pride and posting on social media, I think Instagram was probably one of our biggest factors of how we were able to raise capital. We get a ton of people that would reach out to us, and they always wanted to get involved, right? Everybody wants to be fucking Chip and Joanna Gaines and flip houses and do whatever. Mm-hmm. And we were doing it, right? And we were doing it at a high level. So a lot of people would reach out and be like, hey, how do I get involved? This and that. I want to come flip with you. And I'm like, hey, man, I can't use you on the job site. Like, it's kind of a 2-man job. Like, we got this covered, but what we can use is capital. So we were able to raise, when the early days, like $250,000 pretty quickly. Some of that was from family, some of it was from friends, and everybody kind of came organically to us and was like, hey, I see what you're doing. Like, how do I get involved? Besides maybe a little bit of reaching out between me and Lucas. And then after that, once we were like, oh, like people love the return on the capital, right? I'm not just borrowing their money because they're helping me. Like, I'm borrowing their money. I'm giving them a good return. They love that return. I'm like, there's like this, everything felt good about it, right? We were doing everything I did felt organically, natural, and good. And there was no negative to it to me. And once we that paradigm changed for me on, like, I was able to go repay these people and they were able to do, whatever with the money. We actually got really comfortable with the idea of starting to raise capital. Just privately. We didn't go out and, solicit for it, but we knew a few guys that had some big boy money, and reached out to those guys. We were able to secure, $1 million line of credit, to gap fund a lot of our projects. And by that time we had kind of raised enough of our own capital. We were pretty good at saving, to bankroll some of this stuff too. So, all of our stuff on the acquisition side, was 100% funding on the front, and then we would have 100% funding on the back. So we were able to scale out pretty big, but even, if you miss a little bit, like I said, the earnest deposits between that, bills, and even like the hard money payments, I mean, you could have $500,000 out like that. So we learned pretty quickly that, that cash in, cash out on a flip business can get difficult at times.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like it was mostly private capital that you're able to do all this with.
Yeah, everything was private capital besides the acquisition. That was all from two lenders. So we use, I'll tell everybody this, we use Frank Plus Capital. Shout out Wiley Brown. He funds all of our stuff at 100%. And then we actually found another bank that will do it there in MLS Bank, which means there's a little bit more hoops you got to jump through when you do the loan, but they're also at 100%. Their rate was better, but the gestational period for the funding was a little bit longer. So depending on what the deal was and how fast we needed to close it, we would kind of pick between those two options for funding.
Mm-hmm. Something that stands out to me about this that I don't know if I have a resistance to it. Maybe it just doesn't come as naturally to me. Like, even doing a podcast isn't something that I would have thought of myself doing, just because I'm not like naturally the type to go out and, broadcast everything about my life. But
Yeah.
for you, it seems like you've really been able to leverage telling the world and showing the world what you do. How much of a role do you think that's played in your business right now? And do you see that being a big factor in how you raise money in the future?
It's huge, man. It's huge. From the raising capital standpoint, we pivoted a little bit. We're actually starting a real estate fund, an open-ended fund, so we can go raise as much capital as we want. But that target's gonna be more like $10-20 million. So that's a little bit different animal. But what I think the biggest thing I've learned, and I have a feeling it's going to come for you, because you say it's not natural to me, but you're doing a great job right now. We're bantering back and forth, no issues, right?
Appreciate it.
One of the things that I had to learn over time was I had to be very just transparent with what was going on.
Mhm.
One of the problems I have in this industry is how much bullshit you see, right? Like, it's so easy for someone to post $150,000 check. Here's the settlement statement, or here's my wire deposit. And what most people won't show is what went into that 150 grand, how many problems came up with that property, how much of that is actual profit, right? Yeah, that's gross. That's gross profit, but how much is this net? Did you have $100,000 in renovation and $20,000 in hard money payments, and you actually only made 10 grand and you're just showing basically your money coming back in? Or
Right.
were you highly leveraged and that's basically all profit, right? So I had a problem with that. So I was always very transparent from the beginning, and I was willing to share our problems that we had. For a long time, really through 2021, we would do what we call flip walks. So I would say, hey, whoever wants to come, we're going to come to this house, whatever stage it's in, whether it's beginning, middle, or end, and we're just going to go over the deal. I'm just going to go how we found it, how much it costs, who's our lender, how much did we spend, where do we make mistakes, where do I feel like we did well, and how much money we think we're going to make, or how much do we have it sold for, or whatever. And after doing that for about maybe 3 or 4 months, what I started to realize is the problems I would talk about and what I felt like were deficiencies and I was a little bit insecure about, those were the things that helped everybody the most. It wasn't me making, hey, we made $250,000 in this deal. That didn't help anybody, right? That was hey, cool, maybe a little bit inspiration. But the problems, and I was like, hey, here's how I fucked up. That was oh, dude, I almost had that going on, or I did that too. And I didn't understand why it happened, but now I understand. So the transparency for me kind of came through that and how I could help people. And then I just was you know what, I'm going to be open on social media about it. Especially when we started the podcast, I wasn't as natural on camera. Maybe I don't appear as natural, but I started to get a little bit more comfortable on camera. I don't really, I cuss, I don't, whatever. I'll tell you whatever you want to know. I don't really have any filter when it comes to this. And I think the transparency and the vulnerability really shows through that. I'm just, for me, it's not really about whatever happens to me is, truly we do helping people, that come to us for help.
Yeah, I think it can be it's sometimes easier said than done for people to be their real self on social media. Not in a way that they're trying to disguise their success. I think just naturally people have an inclination to want to present the best things first. Did it switch for you, or one day you're I'm at a level where I'm successful enough that these things are okay to show now, or how did that go for you?
There was a little bit of a confidence shift, especially once we started doing deals and we were cranking them out. And I did start to see some separation between me and some guys that maybe used to be kind of level with each other.
Yeah.
Right. Or people that I thought we were the same, and they would come ask me questions and be how are you doing this or this or that? We're so amazed. And I'm what do you mean? We're the same. We're the same.
Yeah.
And they're yeah, humanly we might be the same, but look what you're doing. I'm oh shit, look what I'm doing. You almost don't even realize it until it's there, right? Until someone calls it out. So yeah, I think that might have been a big part of it. Yeah, I don't know. I think the other part of the confidence comes too is, as we started to kind of scale out our business and bring people on board, and as I was really starting to be able to help people within my little small ecosphere, being able to teach them. First of all, from a teaching aspect, when you can teach somebody to do something, you actually learn I think it's 2 times faster. I don't know what the actual statistic is, but you learn faster when you teach somebody something, because you start to have to understand not just the forefront of the concepts, but the back end of the concepts, right? So when I was able to start doing that and really start helping people make their own money, we got our guy Ruben. He's been in the industry for just a little bit, but just got licensed maybe 6 months ago. He wanted to come on board. I didn't have a place for him for forever. And then eventually I was like, all right, we've got room. And I said, you good to go? He said, I'm good to go. I said, man, I'm like, I promise this will work. I promise I will make this work. If not, I'll fight to my dying breath to make sure it works. Cause he's got a kid on the way, newly married. You know, I see a lot of myself in him from when I was younger, and I kind of took this journey on my own. And, you know, second deal he inks with us, we bought an 11 deal portfolio that closes in 2 days, and the kid's going to make like $70,000 in commission. Right. So one deal. Right. And we've got other deals on the board. He's made more money. Right. So, I mean, we go from, I got to try and go figure this out to like, dang, well, he's probably going to make $100,000 in 6 months when he starts working for us. Right. Now, one of them was huge, right? Granted, but that confidence for me going like, okay, if I just do it and I go out and do it and I focus on that, I can do it. So I think a lot of that confidence now for me is really starting to finally just shine through, because I know I can do it. Right. It's not like I'm not guessing. I'm like, hey, can I do it? I'm like, no, I can do this shit. Right. So, and then now it's my responsibility to go help other people so they can do the same thing.
Yeah, dude, that's so powerful, man. It's like a catch-22, because like you can't get to that level of confidence without having to actually go through the hard stuff. It's just what comes with it. And it sounds like you've done the dirty work and now you're good at what you do. It's almost like you gave yourself permission to be like, yeah, and I'm also not perfect, you know, but I look at all this other cool stuff. I just made this guy this much money.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, they say like fake it till you make it. I'm not sure that it's 100% what it is. I think it's almost like, there's like another one's like, you know, believe until you achieve or whatever. That's probably more accurate. Like you just got to like almost have like blind faith of like, well, I'm just not going to quit and I'll figure it out eventually. And then once you don't quit, you like start to get a little bit of confidence. And once the confidence starts to grow and you make some good decisions and learn from your bad ones, you know, I think that's what it really starts to translate.
Yeah, I totally agree. I saw a clip. I think it was on your social media, but you talked about your spending, where you know, your business is scaled, where you're doing these huge deals, but you mentioned you spend like 10K a month and everything else just goes back into the business. Is that a short-term solution? Is that still the case? What's the thought process behind that?
So originally we were scaling. When I said spend, you know, we Lucas and I each pay ourselves $10,000 a month. That has actually more recently changed, just because of where we're at in the business, and we're actually selling off some of our assets. I want to be liquid for, you know, whatever's coming down the pipe right now. But yeah, I mean, for a long time, well, it was for two reasons. One, if you're scaling a flip business, like I told you, like you need all the capital, man. You need every dime of capital, especially if you go buy, like we did a couple of times, too aggressively. We closed this one deal in Scottsdale, and we bought it at like we were buying it at 420, and the wholesaler comes back, and we trusted him. I trust him a lot. I still do a lot of deals with him. And he goes, man, I got another offer at 425. He goes, we want to sell to you, but I can't go tell my boss I sold it for 5K under what somebody. I'm like, so me and Lucas are sitting in my truck. I still remember, like, man, should we do it? It's $5,000. Should we do it? Should we do it? And then I remember like our new motto, and always we just like, fuck it. Like if we think it's close, fuck it, right? Like we gotta go take this shit. Nothing else, we'll learn something. So we buy it at 425. Our exit's gonna be like 650. So we're gonna make 50, 60 grand because it needed some work. It had a casita and a pool. And so I'm like, all right, 650 is gonna be our exit. By the time we'd like, 4 months in, we got popped by the city of Scottsdale for no permits. The neighbor was screaming at us. We go, it takes an extra 2 months to get the permits, and then we're back, and then like some other delays and like a lot of logistics stuff. And by the time we get done, it's like 6 months in, it's kind of a little blessing in disguise. By the time we get done, it's spring of 2021. And when we go to like run comps at what we're going to list this thing at, well, instead of listing at 650, I'm like, oh man, we got to list this thing at 750 grand. So these little delays had caused like this extra $100,000 in equity. Like we didn't do anything special. It was just like timing, right? Which is crazy. And again, it goes back to like that market's not real, right? And I'm like, man, we got to list at 750 grand. Like, I can't believe this. We kind of debated, like, should we, or are we listing too high? We don't want it to sit. And we listed $750,000. The first offer comes in at $840,000. So just like we go from making like, hey, we're going to make 50, 60 grand to just like $250,000, like that, dude. Just like nothing special. We didn't do anything crazy, just like timing, the market. It was a cool house. We did a good job with it. But it was just like, we could have never figured it. And after that, we were like, we don't even really we want to go buy more houses. So we went and bought like, oh my God, like 4 or 5 houses like the next week. And we were like, oh no, we're good. We've got our money plus another $250,000. Like we're skating right now, dude. 4 months later, that money was gone. It was like gone. I'm like, oh my God, we're out of money. And like the number one rule we have is like, don't run out of money. Like you can't run out of money, because if you run out of money, you can't keep going, right? So we had to go raise some more private capital. We got through all those. So one of our problems that we had, in which it ended up working out to our benefit, is we got a little over aggressive sometimes. We would buy too many houses and we'd spend too much money here and do this and do that. Luckily for us, it was a great market to learn that lesson in. But the other thing was we didn't really need much, man. Our business pays for our trucks. We got some nice pickup trucks that the business pays for. But other than that, we don't need a lot of stuff, man. Usually the business will buy our lunch every day. Like we'll go to lunch together and meeting. So we didn't need a lot. So we just cut ourselves a flat $10,000 a month. It was plenty for us to live off of, and let the business scale and kind of do its thing. Now that we're kind of on the downslope right now, as far as like selling some of our assets and some of our higher end flips, we are stacking a little bit of capital, like personally for ourselves. But that's going to be more of just like, I don't want to spend that money. Like I'm not going to spend it. I'm just going to like let it sit and be ready for whatever opportunity comes my way. So that's the only reason we're doing anything different. So, but yeah, we've always been taking it really easy, because I know too many guys, wholesalers, flippers, that'll close 1 or 2 deals, man. And they're like $100,000 check. And like, dude, the next weekend you'll see them in Cabo. And I'm like, what are you doing, dude? Like you can't, that ain't how it works, right? You can do it, but now you're only going to close like 4 or 5 deals a year because you just like left for a while and you took your eye off the ball. Whereas we're more like focused on like, we need our breaks every now and then, but like, I want scale, man. I want long-term. I want lots of deals really fast. I want to hit my problems, but I want to scale through them quicker. So yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of a way we looked at it.
To me, that's right on the money as far as strategy goes, especially in the market, the way it's changing. From what I've heard, a lot of people are getting pretty liquid to be able to take advantage of some opportunity. That sounds like kind of like what you said. Are there any other strategies you're using?
Man, so I'm hedging both sides. I think I'm probably a little bit more bullish than most people right now. I think there's a lot of fear in the market, and a lot of people just like correlate this recession with 2008. I do think that there are a lot of factors that people just really aren't taking into account. So I want to be ready. I want to be ready either way, right? Like I want to go towards what I kind of believe and what I think and what I feel, but I need to be prepared in case I'm wrong. Because like at the end of the day, like I don't know what's coming down the pipe tomorrow, right? Like I can be like, hey, based on these factors, I'm going to do X. But like at the end of the day, like no one's got a crystal ball. And if they did, if I did, I wouldn't be doing this shit, right? I'd be like just money in the stock market or whatever, and I'd be on a beach somewhere. So, so we are going to stay liquid just in case, for whether that's deals coming down the pipe. But you've got people talking right now like 30-40% decreases in prices. And man, right now I just don't see it. Maybe 5 years down the road, once people are able to like kind of burn this equity they got. I mean, the main problem we got right now is everybody's got equity in their house, man. Everybody. If you bought a house, and I bought my house in 2017, man, I bought it for $350,000. Right now, I could probably sell it for $750,000. Right? I did a little bit of upgrades, but nothing crazy. Nothing that would make the value double in 5 years. Like that's not real, right? I keep going back to it's not real. So that there's not going to have this wave of foreclosures like we did before. You're not going to have the wave of foreclosures where it's causing people's equity to essentially disintegrate overnight. The other thing that's going to happen, and I don't think a lot of people are taking this into account, is rates are going up, right? It affects affordability, like I talked about earlier. So yeah, like you're not going to have a standard family go buy $800,000 house with 5% down at a 7.5% rate. That's not going to happen because the payment would be crazy, like $6,500 a month, something crazy. Yeah. Who's going to afford that, right? That's not going to happen. However, what you are going to have happen is like, do you own a home now or no?
I rent.
Okay, you rent. So I'm a prime example here. And I think I'm going to probably, I don't know how much of a majority I make up in the marketplace right now, but I have a feeling the number's pretty big. So I bought my house in 2017. I refinanced it. My rate's like somewhere in the 3s, right? If I go sell my house now, like I want a bigger house. I would love to have like a, more room for like a gym. And like, I'd love to bring in like a nanny for my kids, like just a little bit more help. The problem I've got is if I go buy a bigger house right now, not only does like the amount I want to finance probably double, so does my rate, right? So really my payment's like 4-fold what I'm at now. So you're going to see a lot of people just like me who would love a bigger house, would love a nicer house, but they're not going to want to move because their rate, right? And prices are up significantly more. So even if like the equity is a wash, like if I sold my house now and I bought another $750,000 house, I don't know why I would do that because moving is a pain in the ass. But now my rate just doubled and I didn't really gain anything, right? I've got the same house or whatever. So I think you're going to see a lot of people like stick into what they've got. And because of that, I think we're going to actually see inventory levels stay relatively low. The other thing that people are not really taking into account, builders are already slowing down. We were already at a deficit with building. And the other factor that almost everybody doesn't take into account is like our population's growing, right? Like not even just in the state of Arizona from like from a migratory perspective, but like from like a people having babies perspective. Like the population is just generally growing, like especially here in the state of Arizona. We're in a desirable place. People want to be here. We were like one of the fastest growing counties in the nation for a long time. So that is going to have an effect here. So I've got questions. Like, I just don't know what's going to happen with like these affordability issues clearly, but also from a simple economics and supply and demand aspect. We are going to continue to stay low. I think for a while. I don't know. We're starting to see inventory creep up. So jury's still out for me.
It's so interesting because there's like multiple ways to look at it that kind of contradict each other. There's not one obvious thing where they're like selling these mortgages to people that are super high risk. And it's like, okay, well, someone's going to figure that out and be able to predict it. Who was the guy that did that before? Michael Burry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if there's someone that's going to be like that this recession, it's too hard.
They're definitely, everyone's got their opinion on it. If they talk about recession, people starting to lose jobs. Well, I'm like, we were already in like this negative, like we already need, everywhere you go, people are like, hey, we're hiring. Please come work for us. Like, when was the last time you went to a restaurant and had like, we go all the time, it'll be packed on a Wednesday, which I'm like, why is no one working? Two, they're like, hey, we have this whole section of tables that we can't even see because we don't even have enough workers to put people back there. We can put you back there, but no one's going to serve you, right? So we've got this weird deal where like, people went home because of the pandemic. They never really went back to work. You do have a little bit of a subset of like maybe the younger generation like figured out they can like, before they could trade crypto and make a little bit of money instead of going to work at McDonald's. But now it's like, shit, you could go on like Twitch or YouTube or do whatever, or like go start your own little business because everything's at everybody's fingertips. So I do think we're having a little bit of a cultural shift here, which will, I think, make a difference. But I also think that the speed in which things happen will probably increase because people can figure things out quicker, right? So it'll be, I don't know, it'll be interesting the next probably 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, that's awesome. I really appreciate your perspective on all of it. You've got a good lens that you view things through, and I think it's worked really well for you for a reason. To kind of close things off, for someone that's looking to get into real estate or needs a resource to get started, what if you were to start in this market today, what would be the first steps you would take as far as like taking action?
So if I wanted to be, when I left lending, I knew I wanted to be completely independent. I didn't want to work for anybody. So I was a little bit of a loner in that aspect of like, I'm not just going to go just go work for somebody. However, if I were to go back and if I had to start from scratch and like if I deleted everything from my brain, I didn't know what I know now. The first thing I would do is I would find somebody that's already functioning at a high level. I would reach out to them individually and I would see what value I could provide to them. That'd be the first thing I could do. Because at the end of the day, if you're a small boat, my buddy Templeton Walker says this all the time, you got to attach yourself to a bigger boat, right? They're creating bigger wakes, they're moving more water, there's just more stuff going on around them. So there's a little bit more that you can kind of catch in those wakes. So I'd probably go find somebody that's doing it at a high level. I'd see what I could do to provide them value, whether that's driving for dollars, making phone calls, following up on stuff. Dude, I'll get your coffee. I don't care, right? Whatever that is, whatever value I can provide, I'd go do that. If it wasn't for that, I think the next thing I'd do, I'd go two ways. If I was licensed, like I was a licensed realtor, I'd straight to the MLS, I'd start hunting for deals. I'd start hunting for deals and I'd be making offers. I'd be trying to make 10 offers a day and I'd be trying to buy at like 65% of ARV. That's where I'd be. And if I was an individual, not licensed, didn't want to go work for anybody else, probably driving for dollars. Even now you can like virtually drive for dollars, like on Google, which is like a really easy way to do it. And then again, attach yourself to a bigger boat, find someone that's already buying at a high level or knows what the fuck they're doing. and I would say, hey man, for the next 6 months, can I send you everything I've got? I know there's gonna be some garbage at first. Can I send you everything I got? In the next 6 months, me and you split it 50-50. Because even for me, a guy like me, I know if I've got someone that's serious about it, it's gonna go hunt every day and they're gonna feed me deal after deal after deal. Yeah, the first few are gonna be garbage, but I can kind of get them coached up on like, hey, here's what you should be looking for. And as long as they're willing to change and they're coachable, man, that last 90 days probably be pretty good. We're probably gonna make some money together, right? So it'd be worth my time as far as the investment's concerned. So I don't know, man. That's probably what I do. I'm hoping I don't have that problem. I'm hoping I'll start from scratch.
No, that's kind of for people listening, and then me. I'm a small operation. I have my brother. He's my partner actually in the Washington market, and so
Cool.
we'll do everything 50-50 there. But he's 16 years old, so I'm still kind of steering the ship right now. He does the virtual driving for dollars. He cranks those out like a machine.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
then I
you're
got
doing
one
it there.
color.
Yeah, I mean, I think right now, especially in this market, like we got to figure out a little bit's going to happen. Like I'm not buying big deals like now, like we were. I bought one the other day, but I think we paid like 480 for it. It's like a $680,000-$700,000 ARV. So there's some spread in that deal. We won't do much. We might end up keeping it for an Airbnb. I don't know. Depends on kind of what happens there. But like, right now, if you're newer and you want to flip, it's going to be a little bit more competitive. Well, it's less competitive than it was. Just buy lower margin, buy below median. Make sure you've got a nice, healthy spread in there. Everyone that's been talking to me recently, they're like, look at this deal. What would you do? This and that. I'm like, man, I wouldn't touch any deal that doesn't make me feel like it's probably going to make me rich. Like, or at least, make me $100,000. Just because there's so much, especially right now, there's so many deals floating around out there. Don't be afraid to go ask for the price you want. If you're going to wholesale, shit, I'm probably not the guy to ask. But we're, our thing right now is we've got cold callers that we're doing. I'm trying to scale out of it pretty quickly though. I want my guys out of that. And then we're doing, pay per click, and, we'll probably have a few other avenues coming in here shortly. But again, I'm probably not the guy for the wholesale side of stuff yet. If you've got a good, I got to talk to you, I'll probably go talk to him with you.
What was the last part?
I said, if you got a guy that you trust and you want to talk to, I'll probably go talk to him with you because I'm learning too.
Okay, sounds good. Well, listen, man, I appreciate all the information. Congrats on all your success. Is there plug social media? How can people find you?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. That's like probably my best format to reach out to me on. It's just at Brandon Arter. No underscores, no capitals, no punctuation, nothing like that. And then you can follow us in my bio. I've got a link in there. We've got the Big D podcast. We've got episodes coming out, I think, this week, where we've got a few different people on there that we go through their story and kind of how they started and got into real estate. And then the focus of the Big D podcast stands for the Big Deal. Is we want to focus on the deal that changed your paradigm, your bank account, your business, right? So that's a pretty cool one if you're interested in real estate. If you don't care about real estate and you want to hear me and my partner Lucas bullshit about like not real estate for an hour, we also have a podcast called Sweet Nine. So those are on like YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, whatever. Our producer Colby does a good job with that sort of stuff. But yeah, reach out to me on Instagram if you need any help with anything, man. We got a full team here that's willing to kind of help whoever. We're still buying. I'm buying deep. Everyone, I tell everyone that's sending me deals right now, it's got to be deep. I'm buying deep deals. I'm not afraid to say it. So, but other than that, that's pretty much it for me, man.
All right, Brandon Arter, everybody, get wealthy.